Under the harsh sunlight of a summer afternoon in Santa Clarita, the asphalt shimmered in the sweltering heat. On the quiet suburban street, lawns were neatly trimmed, sprinklers were running, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint smell of grilled meats wafting from neighboring homes. In the midst of this scene, 7-year-old Emma, whose once long golden hair had been cut short due to chemotherapy, sat on a small wooden stool in front of her homemade lemonade stand. A folding table covered with a faded checkered tablecloth held a pitcher of cold lemonade and a stack of neatly stacked plastic cups. The most prominent was a homemade sign with colorful, scrawled letters. Lemonade for Hope. Emma wasn't like other kids who sold lemonade to buy toys or go to the park. She was raising money for her own chemotherapy treatment after being diagnosed with leukemia nearly a year ago. Despite the long days in the hospital, the painful tests, and the treatments that weakened her body, Emma remained optimistic and determined. Emma's mother, Claire, watched her daughter from her porch with a heart full of pride and sadness. Although Emma's hair had changed, her bright smile and sparkling eyes remained. Emma waved to each passerby, hoping to gain support for her special lemonade stand. A jogger passed by, glanced at the lemonade stand with curiosity, then smiled and continued running. A car slowed down. The driver looked at Emma for a moment and then drove away. Emma was undaunted, adjusting her sign to make sure it was visible from a distance, pouring herself a small glass of lemonade and waiting patiently. Emma's first customer was Mrs. Henderson, an elderly neighbor who approached with a cane. "How much for a glass, dear?" she asked warmly. "$1," Emma replied with a smile. Mrs. Henderson handed her a $10 bill and said, "Keep the change." Her eyes lingered on the words, "Lemonade for Hope," before gently patting Emma on the shoulder, before the last rays of the afternoon sun faded. Emma's lemonade stand stood steadfastly, a symbol of her unyielding spirit. Little by little, more neighbors stopped by. Some bought lemonade, others simply dropped coins or bills into the mason jar. Each interaction brought a new wave of encouragement. As the day wore on, however, it became clear that Emma's goal was still far away. Still, she was undaunted, unaware that today would be the day everything would change, that an extraordinary person was about to enter her life and transform her small lemonade stand into a beacon of hope. Emma's journey began in the most unexpected way. She had always been the picture of health, a lively little girl who spent her days running barefoot through the yard, climbing trees, and riding a pink bicycle with tassels flying on the handlebars. She was the kind of child who filled the room with laughter and a boundless imagination as she drew fairy tale scenes on paper. But about a year ago, everything changed. At first, it was just the fatigue of completing bike rides, frequent naps after school, and small bruises that appeared for no apparent reason. At first, her parents thought it was just a developmental phase. Her father, Brian, said, "Maybe she's just growing up." But Claire, her mother, couldn't shake the feeling of worry. Emma's fever began to fester, low at first, then rising and not falling. Her appetite gradually decreased, and she began to lose a significant amount of weight. One day, Claire noticed that Emma was struggling to lift her art supplies. The once energetic little girl was now too weak to hold a paintbrush for more than a few minutes. That was when Claire knew something was wrong. Claire and Brian took Emma to the pediatrician, hoping for reassurance but also preparing for the worst. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the cheerful posters on the walls did nothing to ease Claire's growing anxiety. After a series of tests, blood draws, and agonizing waits, the doctor entered the room with a look that confirmed their fears. "Emma has leukemia," he said softly, as if a gentle word might lessen the shock. Claire's world seemed to tilt. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. She held Brian's hand, her mind racing with questions and fears. What did this mean for Emma? How would they pay for the expensive treatments? Emma didn't fully grasp the gravity of the diagnosis at first, but she sensed something was wrong. Her parents tried to explain in simple terms, assuring her that they would do everything they could to make her well. But as the weeks passed, the reality began to sink in. The hospital became her second home. The familiar faces of the nurses, the constant rounds of chemotherapy, the harsh treatments taking their toll on her tiny body. Claire was always there, holding her hand through the worst of it, whispering comfort as Emma cried out in pain. Brian worked longer hours to keep up with the mounting medical bills. The strain was etched on his face, even as he tried to stay strong for his family. Emma kept a fire burning inside, finding joy in the little things. A nurse telling a joke, a coloring book from a visitor, the warmth of a favorite blanket. One evening, as she sat cross-legged on the living room floor, coloring while her parents chatted softly in the kitchen, she looked up and asked, "Mommy, what if I did something to help?" Claire knelt beside her, brushing the last strand of hair from her forehead. "What do you think, honey?" "If I sold lemonade," Emma said in a hopeful, innocent voice, "anyone who wanted lemonade could buy it to help me." Claire's throat tightened. Emma's simple idea was both heartbreaking and beautiful. She hugged her daughter, her voice choked with tears. "That's a great idea, honey. We're going to do it." The next day they got to work. Emma drew the design for the sign, while Claire prepared the materials. The bright colors and bold letters reflected Emma's determination, despite the pain she endured every day. She poured her heart into every detail, believing that her small actions could make a big difference. Little did she know that her lemonade stand would not only help her, but also bring the community together in unexpected ways. The following Saturday morning, Emma's dream of a lemonade stand came true. The sun rose early, casting long shadows over the neighborhood as Claire helped Emma set up the stand in front of her house. Emma wore her favorite yellow dress, insisting that it went well with lemonade. A floppy straw hat hid her face, and though the treatments had left her pale, excitement had brought a rosy glow to her cheeks. They set up a folding table, covered with a plaid napkin Claire had found in a storage box. A pitcher of fresh lemonade, with just the right amount of sugar and lemon, stood proudly in the center, steam condensing on the glass. Beside it was a neat stack of plastic cups in a glass jar that read "Donate" in Emma's shaky but determined handwriting. The sign was Emma's favorite part. She'd worked on it all week, using crayons and pencils to write "Lemonade of Hope" in bold, colorful letters. Below, she'd drawn a bright yellow sun and a red heart, the kind of design only children could create, imperfect but full of emotion. They'd placed the sign on an old easel, making sure everyone who passed by saw it. The first hour was quiet. A jogger passed by, waving to Emma but not stopping. A car slowed near the stand. The driver looked curiously but then kept going. Emma, undaunted, adjusted her hat and poured herself a small glass of lemonade, sipping it as she waited. Mid-morning, the first customer arrived. Mrs. Henderson, who lived 2 doors down, walked up with a cane, tapping the sidewalk. "Good morning, Emma," she said, her voice warm. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson," Emma replied. Emma beamed back. "Would you like a lemonade? $1 a pop." Mrs. Henderson smiled, pulling a $10 bill from her purse. "I'd like one, honey. Keep the change." Emma handed her a cup, her hand shaking slightly. "Thank you very much," she said, her voice full of gratitude. As Mrs. Henderson left, more neighbors began to arrive. A young mother pushing a stroller stopped to buy a cup, then a group of children from Emma's school, their parents in tow. They brought energy and laughter, chatting happily as they bought lemonade and asked about the sign. "To help with my chemo," Emma explained simply. Her sincerity prompted many customers to add money to the donation jar. By noon, the news had spread. Cars stopped, and the driver bought lemonade and chatted with Claire, who sat on a nearby bench. The smell of freshly cut grass and children's laughter filled the air, but all eyes were on Emma's stand. "How much is a cup?" he asked, reaching for his wallet. $1, Emma replied, pouring and handing him the cup. Mr. Alvarez took a sip, smacking his lips dramatically. "This is the best lemonade I've ever had. Here's 20. Keep up the good work, kid." Emma giggled, her spirits high. For the first time in months, she felt like she was more than just a little girl battling a disease. She was making a difference, one lemonade at a time. The crowds continued to arrive throughout the day, and by mid-afternoon, the donation jar was nearly full. Claire couldn't help but be moved by the sight of her daughter interacting with neighbors and strangers, Emma's confidence blossoming with every kind word and gesture. The day felt like a triumph, but Emma had no idea what was about to happen. An unexpected visitor would come and change everything. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows across the neighborhood. Emma poured another glass of lemonade, the donation jar nearly overflowing, filled with bills and coins that glittered in the afternoon light. The air was charged with energy as neighbors came and went, each making a small contribution to Emma's stand. Despite the heat, Emma was undaunted. She adjusted her straw hat, her small hand clutching the pitcher as she served customers. Claire watched proudly from her chair, chatting with her neighbors, but always keeping an eye on her daughter. From down the street, a figure caught Emma's eye, a tall man in an old leather jacket and dark jeans, slowly approaching the stand. His movements were deliberate, his posture relaxed but assertive. Sunglasses covered his eyes, his stern face hidden in shadow. He exuded a quiet confidence that made a few people turn to look. Emma squinted at the stranger, her curiosity clear. He was not a regular runner or a familiar neighbor. Stopping a few feet from the counter, he watched with a small smile, the corners of his mouth lifted. "Hello," Emma greeted brightly, her voice echoing in the quiet of the street. "Would you like a glass of lemonade, just $1?" The man leaned down, his hands on his knees to look her in the eye. $1. Sounds like a bargain, he said, his voice deep and seasoned. "What's all this about?" he asked, pointing at the sign. "To help with my chemotherapy," Emma explained simply, her tone matter of fact but with a quiet strength. "I want to help my parents so they don't worry." The man's expression softened. He looked at the collection jar, then back at Emma, seeming to hesitate before making up his mind. Finally, he pulled a checkbook from his coat pocket. "What's your name, little girl, Emma?" she said, blinking at him. "Good, Emma," he said, writing something on the check. "I think it's time this lemonade stand got the attention it deserves." He tore off the check and handed it to her. Emma opened it, her little hands shaking as she read the number. Her eyes widened, her mouth gaping. 50,000, she exclaimed, her voice barely above a whisper. Claire, watching from a distance, rushed to her daughter's side. 50,000, she repeated, her voice shaking, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what to say. Thank you so much." The man smiled, his weathered face softening. "No need to thank me. This girl is the one who does the real work." Someone in the crowd whispered, "Wait, is that Clint Eastwood?" His name spread quickly, people began whispering, taking pictures. But Clint focused only on Emma and her family. Emma asked curiously, "Are you famous?" Clint smiled, looking down at her. "A little," he said softly, "but not as famous as you're going to be, Emma." The crowd chuckled, breaking the tension. Clint patted Emma on the shoulder. "Keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more people like you." The donation jar was full, the check handed over, but the impact of this encounter was just beginning. The air was charged with energy as everyone realized Clint Eastwood was standing in front of Emma's little lemonade stand. Word spread, people were whispering, taking pictures, but Clint's attention was only on Emma and her family. Emma looked at the check. The number was too big to believe. 50,000, she muttered, her voice shaking. Claire bent down, her hands shaking as she held the check, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice choking. Clint smiled, his face radiating kindness. "It's not about the money," he said, his voice calm. "It's about showing this little girl she's not alone. She did the hard part, just needed a little motivation." As if on cue, the crowd applauded. Mr. Alvarez, the jovial mailman, stepped forward first. "Emma," he said, pulling out a $50 bill, "I think Clint has the right idea." When the man said, "Let's make sure you have everything you need," the domino effect was immediate. One by one, people reached into their pockets and purses, pulling out whatever they could donate. Some handed in 20s, others dropped crumpled 5s and 1s into the already full donation jar. Some even wrote checks on the spot. Emma's lemonade stand, which had started the day with a modest goal, was now the center of something extraordinary. Claire could barely keep up, tears welling up in her eyes as she thanked each person who stepped forward. Meanwhile, Emma stood behind the lemonade stand, her face beaming with gratitude and a little surprise. "So I don't have to sell lemonade anymore?" Emma asked, giggling shyly, her eyes turned to the man. He laughed, a deep, warm laugh that rippled through the crowd. "You don't have to do that," he said, leaning down to look her in the eye. "But something tells me you'll keep finding ways to make the world a brighter place. That's who you are." The moment was charged with energy, with a rare sense of hope. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Group photo." Soon neighbors gathered, smiling brightly at Emma and the man at the center. The photo, taken by a local photographer, went viral, becoming a symbol of how one act of kindness can inspire an entire community. By the end of the day, the total donations had exceeded 10,000 in cash, not including the man's check. Emma's humble lemonade stand had become a beacon of generosity, bringing out the best in everyone who passed by. But the man wasn't done yet. As the crowd began to disperse, he leaned closer to Claire and whispered, "I have some friends who want to help. Don't be surprised if you hear from them in the next few days." Claire, still overwhelmed, nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for changing our lives." He smiled, said goodbye, and turned away. His leather jacket glinted in the afternoon sun as he disappeared down the street. Neighbors watched, deeply aware of what had just happened. But the story wasn't over. The impact of the man's generosity and the chain reaction it set off was about to reverberate far beyond this suburban street. In the days following the surprise visit, Emma's lemonade stand became the talk of the town, then the nation. Photos and videos of the encounter were shared by neighbors on social media and quickly went viral. News outlets covered the story, praising the little girl for her big dreams and the man's act of generosity. The image of Emma standing proudly in front of her lemonade stand with her bright sign and bright smile touched everyone's hearts. At first, Claire and Brian were overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Strangers began showing up at their door with flowers, donations, and cards for Emma. The mailbox was flooded with envelopes, many containing checks and letters of encouragement. A handwritten note from a boy in Kansas read, "I read about your story and wanted to help. I hope you get better soon." Support didn't just come from individuals. Local organizations and businesses wanted to contribute. One philanthropist offered to cover all of Emma's medical expenses. A national lemonade company sent a partnership request, wanting to produce a product line called Emma's Lemonade of Hope, with a percentage of profits going to pediatric cancer research. Emma, a little girl with small dreams, became a symbol of hope and resilience. She realized that her small actions had created a wave of big change. And as she continues her journey, she knows she is not alone. The community, and indeed the world, is behind her. Emma's story is a reminder that sometimes a small act of kindness can ripple out and make an unexpected difference, bringing hope and light to those who need it most. Dear Emma, I read your story and want to help. Even though I don't have much money, I hope this too will make a difference. You are so brave. Love, Charlie, age 8. Emma was so touched. She carefully placed the letter in the shoebox where she had begun keeping all the cards and notes she received, insisting to her mother that they keep each one. "These people are helping me," she said one evening as she carefully stacked the letters. "I want to remember them." But the story didn't just inspire individuals, it also attracted the attention of local businesses and charities. A nearby hospital reached out, offering to cover any remaining medical expenses Emma's family might face. A popular lemonade brand sent her a year's supply of their product, along with a heartfelt note, "Emma, your courage reminds us of the sweetness of life. Continue to inspire the world." Claire and Brian watched in amazement as the financial burden began to ease. The hospital bills, which had been a storm cloud over their lives, were suddenly being paid for, piece, by the generosity of strangers. And it wasn't just financial support. Offers of help with meals, transportation, and even childcare poured in from the community. The ripple effect of Clint's act of kindness extended beyond their small neighborhood. Inspired by Emma's story, other kids began setting up lemonade stands of their own, donating the proceeds to local hospitals and cancer charities. A movement began to take shape, with the hashtag #HardLemonadeForHope trending on social media. Stories poured in from across the country, kids raising money for loved ones, communities coming together, and even celebrities stepping up to donate in Emma's name. Despite all the attention, Emma remained humble. One evening, as she sat on the living room floor with her parents, sorting through another pile of mail, she looked up and said, "Do you think we could help other kids like me? Maybe we could do something bigger." Her words sparked an idea. With additional donations, Claire and Brian helped Emma set up the Lemonade of Hope Foundation, an initiative to support families struggling with the cost of medical treatment. The foundation's mission is simple: No child should have to choose between fighting for their life and worrying about the cost of treatment. The foundation launched quietly, but quickly gained traction. Within weeks, donations began pouring in from all over the world. Schools held lemonade stand fundraisers, businesses pledged to match donations, and other communities, inspired by Emma's story, started their own local efforts. One day, Emma received a package from Clint Eastwood himself. Inside was a framed photo of the two of them at her lemonade stand, along with a handwritten note. "Keep fighting, little girl. You're making the world a better place." Emma's eyes sparkled as she read the note aloud, her voice steady despite her emotions. "I want to make him proud," she said softly, clutching the note to her heart. What began as a simple lemonade stand blossomed into a movement, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can grow into something extraordinary. For Emma and her family, the journey has been about more than the generosity they have received. It has been about the new hope they can give to others. In the months since that memorable day, Emma and her family's lives have changed. The constant worry on Claire and Brian's faces has eased, replaced by a sense of relief they haven't felt in over a year. The overwhelming medical bills are no longer a burden, thanks to the generosity of neighbors, strangers, and an iconic actor who stepped up when they needed it most. Emma's health, while still undergoing treatment, is improving. With the financial burden lifted, the family can focus on supporting her emotionally and physically. Emma's spirit remained bright, and her lemonade stand became a cherished memory, not only for her family, but for everyone who participated in that special day. But the story didn't end there. Emma's Lemonade of Hope grew rapidly, becoming a national movement. Schools across the country joined in with lemonade fundraisers, teaching children about the power of kindness. Companies pledged to match donations, and families struggling with medical expenses began to receive help from Emma's initiative. The little girl who once sat on a stool in front of her house was now an inspiration to thousands. She became a symbol of resilience and compassion, proving that even the smallest voices can resonate far and wide. One day at a local event celebrating the foundation's success, Emma stood on a small stage, clutching the microphone with a slightly shaky but confident hand. The crowd, which included neighbors, volunteers, and supporters, watched her take a deep breath and begin to speak. "Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you." Her voice was clear and steady despite her young age. "When I started the lemonade stand, I just wanted to help my parents. I didn't think so many people would care. But you did, and now we can help other kids like you. So thank you for believing in me." The applause was thunderous, and as Emma stepped back from the microphone, Claire hugged her tightly, whispering, "You made me so proud." Behind the crowd, Clint Eastwood stood quietly, dressed casually in a simple jacket and baseball cap. He smiled softly, hands in his pockets, not needing recognition or fanfare, just there to quietly congratulate the little girl on turning a simple act of generosity into a force for change. As the event ended, a reporter asked Emma what she had learned from it all. She thought for a moment before answering. Her words simple yet profound: "I learned that no matter how big or small you are, you can always do something to help. And when people help each other, wonderful things can happen." Her answer became a rallying cry for the organization, a message that resonated with people everywhere. Stories began to pour in about children inspired by Emma to start their own small acts of kindness, from bake sales to car washes, all with the goal of making the world a little brighter. The family will never forget the moment that changed their lives, the day a man in a leather jacket stopped by the lemonade stand and saw the heart behind the simple sign. And as Emma's story continues to inspire, it reminds everyone that, even in the darkest of times, kindness and hope can light the way forward. If this story resonates with you, please take a moment to think about how you can make a difference, no matter how small. Share this story to inspire others, and remember that every act of kindness, big or small, can ripple out in ways you never expected. And if you want to hear more stories like Emma's, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope, courage, and humanity.